لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول
السلام
الله.
عليكم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I greet you all with the peace and blessings of God. I would like to share with you a few reflections about Hagar. For those of you who are familiar with the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Old Testament, there's a story that happens in chapter 21 where Hagar is left behind with her son Ishmael in Beersheba, in the wilderness of Beersheba. And I'd like to take a moment to kind of discuss the way the story is portrayed and the way Hagar in specific is portrayed in that chapter. I will read to you just a few verses from this chapter, where early next morning Abraham took some bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He placed them over her shoulder together with a child and sent her away. And she wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water was gone from the skin, she left the child under one of the bushes, and went and sat down at a distance, a bow shot away, for she thought, "Let me not look on as the child dies." And sitting thus afar, she burst into tears. For those of you who are familiar with chapter 21 of Genesis, we know that the angel comes to Hagar and he gives her the glad tidings of, that Ishmael will be a great nation, and gives her, and the miracle of a well of water appears. As I often ask my students, we don't really know, according to the Bible, what happens to Hagar after this, right? And in a way, Islam provides for us a sequel to that story, right, through the prophetic tradition. And there are some overlapping themes, but there are also some key differences I want to point out today. One of the important differences is, first of all, in according to the Muslim tradition, Hajar is not abandoned, right? That this is part of a divine plan. And the reason we know this is because of Hajar herself. We see this persistence from Hajar, knowing how to break her husband's silence, as she asks him, "Why are you leaving us here?" And he silently walks away. And then she finally asks, "Did God command you to do this?" And when he says yes, she responds, "Idhan la yudayya'un Allah," then God will not forsake us. And we see a few important points here, right? A few key there are a few important points to make of this story. One of which, Hajar, her faith in God is independent of her relationship with any other human being. She is left in the desert, in what, according to the Muslim tradition, this is what we know as current day Mecca, also called Mecca in the Quran. And at that point, it's uninhabited, right? It is just a desert. There's no water, there's no marketplace, there's no farm. And she is left here, and yet even at that moment where she has nothing, she says, "God will not forsake us." And, we see this sort of sincerity, the sidq with God that she has, in knowing with absolute certainty that God will take care of her. And so rather than sitting away and saying and crying and saying, "I can't bear to look into my son's face as he passes away," the Muslim tradition portrays her as someone who runs courageously between two hills, between the Safa and Marwa, in search of sustenance for her child, right? It portrays a woman who will do anything necessary to save her son. And basically, it transforms this meek and helpless figure into a force of wonder and a matriarch of a new civilization. We know the rest of the story, according to the prophetic tradition, is that the spring of Zamzam then miraculously appears. And yet it doesn't just appear. She first takes action. She first exerts effort. And as one of my good friends, Ustada Saima Yaqub, pointed out to me, this is a reflection of the fact that Allah has created the world as a place of means, that we must take the means first, right? And then the second important point is, I want to point out a few details. So when the spring of Zamzam emerges, she actually tries to protect this spring, and she begins to, with her hands, create a basin around it. And this is something that the Prophet, peace be upon him, stops while he's relaying the story to basically commend this action. And the Prophet at that point, he adds, may God bestow mercy on Ismail's mother. Had she left Zamzam, Zamzam would have been a stream flowing on the surface of the earth, right? And so in a sense, she protected this water, this spring of water. And as we know, also one of the tribes comes to inhabit the city, and it's not a city yet, right? But comes to inhabit this place because of the water. And while Hajar agrees, she says, you will have no right to possess the water, right? So she understands property rights. And she is not only the founder of Mecca, but she owns the property rights for Zamzam. She is the first matriarch of this civilization, right? And her courageous action, her maternal instinct to save her son is something that Muslims are asked to commemorate year after year when they perform the Hajj, as well as when they perform the minor pilgrimage of Umrah, right? No individual's Umrah is complete without walking 7 times between these 2 hills in commemoration of the selflessness and faith and maternal courage of this woman, of Hajar alayhi salam. And with your brief indulgence, I would like to share a story that happened to me when I performed the Hajj last year, where I perceived with piercing clarity a truth that I had never before experienced, which is just the essence of who we are as human beings, which is the soul. And for those of us who have been blessed to perform the Hajj, the circumstances in which we find ourselves and the acute awareness of the fact that we might not return to our families allows us to experience our soul and perceive our soul in the way we are normally not able to perceive. And it was in that time and space when I realized that we were all being asked to be like Hajar alayhi salam, to relinquish our anxieties and our fears and completely put our trust in God.
La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah.